Welcome back to my meandering landslide of verbiage on the subject of sell it all or hold the line. This is the final part 4 of 4 on my little rant. In part 1, we discussed the $1,000 price tag and the door this opens for Wizards to roll over all the untapped reprint equity in the reserved cards, and why it's in their interest not to collapse the secondary market. And then in the second part, we sorted through almost $1 million worth of dual land sales and data in the last 3.5 months. And we looked at the 6 most popular gold-bordered reserve list staples. And I calculated from those 2 data sets a sort of worst case expected loss of 9.2% of the market value of cards that receive this proxy reprint treatment, in addition to the market background. In the third part of this rant, I expanded that to the Silver Age cards and discussed the sort of elevated risks, and also tried to put a little bit of scale and perspective onto the total risk, which I feel to be lower than people might think when first hearing about what exactly was going on here. And again, that those impressions are coming from the numbers, not from sort of just my own opinion of it. That seems to be what those numbers show. And again, I said this before, I'll say it again. It's totally possible I missed something. It's totally possible that there's other factors in play here, or that something about these proxies will make them much different from the gold-bordered ones that exist, or that Wizards will make some just bad plays that aren't even in their own best interest. And, I sort of outlined the assumptions that I was onboarding. And, take those as you will. If you disagree with them, you can adjust the numbers accordingly and go from there. But I'll carry on with those same numbers for now. So let's hit my closing thoughts, and hopefully this can be my last video on Magic 30 for a little while. And I will say one benefit of this crazy rant is I got through just piles of mail. Man, I should show you sometimes. I have a backlog. Some of these packages I received in August, and I still haven't opened them. But, is what it is. All right, fine start to the day. Another jump for the Horde. Man, there is something wrong with me, and I don't know what it is yet. But maybe we'll figure it out together. Okay, so should you buy this thing? Am I buying it? Let's just talk about that for a minute. All right, so just being objective here, putting everything else aside, I can't pretend that there isn't an opportunity for flipping. Not a guarantee, an opportunity. Whenever anything is a limited print run, and it's got this much hype, be that hype good or bad, people are going to want it. People are going to miss out on the first release, and they're going to have no choice but to go to the secondary market. I think I mentioned in the first part of this video, although the product is very clearly targeted, or I should say designed for Commander players, Wizards is targeting it, I think, for speculators and for flippers. They are trying to sell it to the speculators and flippers, justifying it by saying it's for collectors. And then it's been designed to have resale value to the players after the boxes are opened. And so, there's no shortage of speculators in MTG finance world. People will miss out. People will want to get in. Many creators are going to want to take a shot, on camera of pulling a Lotus. Channels with a lot of views will subsidize the cost. So, no doubt there will be a market for this thing. And so, yes, that means it's possible that there will be some opportunity for flipping. or for long-term value. You know, if this doesn't get lost among 1,000 other products, then in another 10 years, this could be, you know, if this is the one and only time they do a Lotus reprint, this could, the sealed boxes could gain value. But use caution, I would say. Once openings start happening, and you know the reality of how unlikely good pulls are sort of spreads, you know, the demand may not hold. And once a couple of the big channels burn through a few boxes, interest might start falling. These kind of openings might not get the views anymore. And you know, the spacing between releases is not that large. And so while this is soaking up all the air right now, we'll be on to the next thing before too long. And, you know, will the price hold up after that? Who knows? Because this product is so clearly marketed towards speculators, it means you could be easily jumping into a greater fool pyramid. So just remember, if you do decide to speculate on this, somebody else has to be willing to pay you more for it down the road, or else you're going to be stuck holding the bag. So, yeah, sure, flipping opportunity may exist here. It seems like a very expensive lottery ticket, but it's there. But what about me? I will not be buying this. I was torn when it came out. I've equivocated a few times in the course of thinking through this. Oh, that is a beautiful blaze of glory. But I have now decided I will not spend $1 on this product. It's higher risk than plenty of other available investments, such as beautiful alpha cards, or, you know, a high-grade vintage card or vintage sealed product. In this economy, where prices are stagnant or even down, the opportunity cost to spend $1,000 on something that's higher risk even than the stuff we're already speculating on here, that opportunity cost, in my opinion, is higher than the flipping potential. So when I account for the risk, I do not think it is a worthwhile move financially. But furthermore, and the thing that sort of made up my mind is I just don't approve of this direction. So I had another video scheduled that I need to remake. It was right before this announcement hit. And it was my attempt to explain why the secondary market is necessary for the health of the game. As much as people don't like the reserve list, I think investors aren't evil. Well, maybe they're evil, but I think they play an indispensable function. And I don't think the game would exist very long if there was no secondary market, no reserve list. You know, I understand why people don't like it. I get it. I can even understand the perspective that perhaps it's been outgrown. I just don't agree with it. I think ultimately what's given the game its longevity is the stability for collectors, is the ability for dealers to exist in the market to create liquidity. And all of this is sort of tied together. Players create collectors create stability and demand. Anyway, I'll make that video again at another time. But this doesn't violate the reserve list, but it sure as hell violates the spirit of the reserve list. Now, say what you want, but the spirit of the reserve list was clearly a thing for a long while. Until a week ago, and now it's not a thing. Look at this post from 2017. We are unwilling to reprint reserved cards at normal card size, regardless of the border or back. So, you know, yeah, words are wind. We know this. But nonetheless, they stood by this for a long time. they kept saying it. And, you can't even blame Hasbro. Hasbro acquired Wizards of the Coast in 1999, so they've been on board for this ride, and they haven't forced any changes until very recently. And the so-called Spirit of the Reserve list, it was a thing, and they played into it. Everyone played into it. And let's be clear, nothing about the reserve list constitutes a contract or a law or anything of the sort. I did a whole video on the sort of dubious supposition that breaking the reserve list would subject Wizards of the Coast to some kind of sustainable lawsuit. I think that that's pretty doubtful. The 30-second version of that is a so-called promissory estoppel could potentially be used to hold Wizards of the Coast liable for a secondary market crash. If and only if a couple of things. First, Wizards made a promise. Second, it was reasonable for a person to rely on that promise. Third, Wizards knew it was reasonable for a person to rely on that promise. Fourth, Wizards breaks that promise anyway. And fifth, the person loses money as a direct result of relying on that promise and the promise being broken. That all hinges on those middle clauses. Specifically, it has to be reasonable to a court standard. It has to be reasonable that a person would trust the promise and have reason to think that that promise was to be upheld. That's a beautiful Lord of the Pit. Let me just run the stats on this guy. There's 9 of these guys on the market, priced between 1,000 and 1,700. Except for 2 of those are near mints. One of them's a gem mint, and those 2 near mint ones are priced between 7,000 and 10,000. That's pretty high for this card. I haven't seen. That's pretty new for those to be pricing that high. But maybe that's where we're at. There were 3 recent sales, none of them in great condition, but they fell between 900 and 2,000. And one of the 2,000 sale was probably LP plus. The graded pop on this guy's 164, 91 of which are near mint. So anyway, this concept that Wizards could be liable for causing the market crash entirely depends on satisfying the court standard of the reserve list being a reasonable promise. But here's the thing. The reserve list was violated in 1998. That's only 2 years after it started. It was massively altered in 2002. Cards were added, cards were removed, future sets were no longer included under its wording. And then judge foils were printed continuously from 1998 until 2009. So just look at that the way a court would look at that. We've had this reserve list for 26 years, and it was either being changed or being violated in some way for 12 of those 26 years. So that means nearly half the time that the reserve list existed, Wizards was breaking it in some way. So, the idea that a court is going to look at that and say, oh yeah, it's reasonable for someone to put stock in this, when it's been delinquent in some form for half of the time that it's existed is, just not, I don't think that's reasonable. So to me, it's not about law. It's not even about exact wording. It's really just been down to Wizards' sort of attitude, their spirit, the promise. It was always about, from the very first revision, it was always about maintaining card values in the secondary market. They said that explicitly in the Duelist magazine when they first published the reprint policy after Chronicles. And so, the fact that they're now falling right to the letter of the wording, yeah, fine. Of course, they could do that if they wanted. But this is a change. This is a new direction. This is a fuck you to the old way of looking at it. And, they can play innocent all they want. They can say, yeah, but, this and this exception, and it was worded in this way. But, it's just This is just a far cry from the many posts from Mark Rosewater lamenting how he's tried and failed to get around the reserve list and people should just come to terms with it. And you know, let me show this again. I mean, look at this. Regardless of the backer border. So, you know, I'm just not buying it. And, you know, let's be honest, it's not like I'm short on ways to burn money, you know? I mean, I'm sure everybody listening would have a pretty easy time finding something else to do with $1,000 if, you know, if you had to, right? So I just say, fuck it. They can do their thing. You know, my lack of support's not going to matter to them, you know? They're not going to care. They're not going to miss me. But, well, as Shakespeare wrote in Hamlet, this above all to thine own self be true. And so that's what I'm going to do. Ooh, another elf. That's what I'm going to do. So, like Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, I'm out. You do what you want. I won't hold it against you. But, yeah, not for me. I will use that $1,000 for something else. And that concludes my incredibly long, rambling diarrhea of a rant about the 30th anniversary set. Please leave any thoughts in the comments. This is obviously very complicated, and new perspectives are popping up constantly. So if there's anything I've covered across these 4 parts that you disagree with, I'd really love to hear your reasoning. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you liked today's video and you'd like to see more videos like this one, then you're going to have to get over here as fast as you can and tell it to all these guys in the white coats. I don't know what they want from me. I'll see you next time.